Goeiemorgen. Good morning, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. You know, there's a great truth in the email that I'm going to read back to you. It's a real person perspective on life pre-1994. Very, very interesting. And the reason I'm raising this is because, you know, the apartheid era is always shrouded in this, like, it's evil, it's terrible. The blacks were treated really bad and the whites oppressed them. And basically, apartheid was wrong. I mean, there's no question about the flaws within the apartheid system. But what this lady's done is raised a very interesting issue about how the black community was treated. And it's right on the money. And if you look what's happening right now in South Africa, and in particular with the health sector, you can see there's a huge issue happening. You know, the whole health sector is in a state of collapse. Most of the good doctors have left the country. I think the very few younger doctors are left in South Africa, and they're rare as hen's teeth. And I want to raise something that, before I recite this, something that actually happened to me when I was in South Africa. I had a farm in the Drakensberg. I've talked about this in the past. And it was near Champagne Castle. And I used to go up there on the weekends because I actually worked at Escort at Barclays Bank. This was back in 1980, 1981, that sort of era. And it was a 50-acre farm. And I didn't have anything on it. It was just incredibly peaceful and beautiful views of the Drakensberg, you know, Champagne Castle and Cathkin Peak. And I was working on my farm one Sunday, and I heard this voice, and I looked up, and just outside the fence there was this elderly black fella walking. And I went up to see him and have a chat, and it quickly became apparent that he was, you know, destitute. And I invited him over to come and join me because I was just about to have lunch. And so we chatted, and I got my meat and we shared that, and, you know, we chatted over the barbecue. And he told me his story. And he was in his late 60s. And what had happened is that he had worked for one of these Anglo-American mines for something like 40 years of his life. And tragically, after 40 years, he was down in the mine and a rock fell on his back and he was unable to work anymore. So what did Anglo-American do? They gave him the, get out of here, you can't help us anymore. Without a pension. He didn't get anything at all, no pension. And his family lived in Lesotho. So he was basically thrown out after 40 years of work for Anglo-American with no compensation at all. And he walked back to his kraal, where he had been actually giving the family the money that he earned. And because he was getting old, and because he could no longer do anything, they kicked him out. The family kicked him out in Lesotho. Yeah, he was a Basotho. And what this guy had done was he had actually walked over the Drakensberg into KwaZulu-Natal. And I was the first person he probably came across. And, you know, he after telling me his predicament, because he was obviously desperate for some place to where he could call home, I invited him to become the person who would take care of my farm from Monday to Friday. And he built this lovely little mud house on my farm, thatch roof, very, a lovely guy. I mean, I used to go up there on weekends and we used to reminisce and talk, and, you know, a lovely, lovely guy. And just thinking about it now brings tears to my eyes. But I would bring him food every weekend, maize meal and other bits and pieces, milk, and there was a tap on the neighbouring farm where the farmer there was quite happy for him to go and get water and stuff like that. So he had a very simple, but he had a settled lifestyle. But he was completely tossed out by, these big mining companies. Once they'd used him, they just discarded him. And this brings us to the email that I received. And this is a shout out to Janine. And she's talking about the days when apartheid was basically happening. And I'm not going to go and try and justify anything anymore, because everybody knows how I feel about apartheid. I left South Africa because of apartheid. Now, having said that, let's see what she says about how the black Africans were treated under that particular rule. And this is never talked about. This is completely ignored by the mainstream media. It's like, oh, apartheid, keep it away from me. But this is the reality. And I recall this because, I grew up under apartheid. And I left South Africa in 1986. So I know what she's talking about. And she says, after watching the video of that woman who had so much to say about the hatred of the RVB towards blacks, makes my blood boil. I worked for Mr. Dick Upton, who was a staunch RVB member, yet he was the kindest and most generous man I have ever worked for. Wright Cast Construction had a few contracts with the National Party government, building houses for both the Cabora Bassa Dam project and one in the Grootfontein, Southwest Africa, together with some smaller ones. One day while I was filling in as the receptionist, I took a call from an Afrikaans man, who I asked in my best Afrikaans to please speak a little slow, because my Afrikaans wasn't very good. He lashed out at me in no uncertain terms, and I replied in my best English, my mum is Welsh, and I speak with a lilt. And yes, Scott, I am a hothead. She's Aries, apparently. That it was his attitude. I would never attempt speaking Afrikaans again. Mr. Upton called me into his office after he had spoken to the man, asked me what had happened, confirmed I had attempted to speak Afrikaans, and was told that the man was the minister of, and she said something to do with building. But she was obviously a very high up person in the National Party government. About 10 minutes later, I got a call from the man apologizing for his behavior. This was a time when the Nats were trying to bring down the English education, even stealing good English maths and science teachers from English schools and placing them into Afrikaans schools. They even went so far as to pay Afrikaans teachers more than English ones. Some years later, I had occasion to be in Queenstown and dropped in to see Mr. Upton on his sheep farm. The RVB man used to help the black farmers in the Transkei with farming, even offering to help on a Sunday. I was stunned and asked why he, as a member of the RVB, would help a black man. And he replied, I will help anyone who is prepared to help themselves, but I will not give whilst they sit back and do nothing. Now think back about the murder of Terre Blanche. The one little shit who took part in the murder actually said he was a good man. And this is very important because, the way the RVB has been portrayed by the media is the most racist, horrible organization, and yet the members of the RVB worked on their farms with their black workers, and they all got on famously well together. So there's some kind of disconnect here between reality and the falsehoods that have been pushed by the media. There is something here that does not compute. Let's continue with what she says. I wonder how many people know that the Nats did for the blacks. Case in point, in 1991 I landed up in the Johannesburg General Hospital, where I spent 3 months in a ward of 5 beds shared with coloureds, Indians, blacks, and of course, the white woman. One day I asked a particularly well-dressed black woman how much she paid per day, and was told 15 rand. I paid 247 rand per day. I spoke to the accounting department at the hospital and was told that the difference of 233 rand would be recovered from the government. Prior to this, I called an ambulance for a man who appeared to be injured. Being midnight, I did not stop, but some men did and asked me to call an ambulance. When I called, I was asked whether the man was black or white, which made me very angry, but was told that if it was a white person, the fee for the ambulance would be 10 rand, but if it was a black person, the fee would be just 1 rand. Yep, the dreaded Nats subsidized everything for the blacks, and I, like most, didn't know. In 1984-ish, I worked for Kennedy and Donkin and had to send the cost of living report to the UK every 6 months. Was great, got 2 cost of living increases plus the annual ones. The medical contributions were actually based on race, taking the same salary and same marital status. Whites paid the most, followed by Indians, who paid a little less, coloureds, who paid less, and then Indians and blacks less than the coloureds. I was mortified. Also, if the Nats who provided transport in and out of Soweto when the staff at Baragwanath Hospital went on strike, leaving the sick without any care at all, the ladies of the black sash would be picked up and taken home after the working the whole day, cleaning, feeding, etc., until the strike ended. Oh, I had my eyes opened, and that is not to say I liked all of them. De Klerk, that's what she calls de Klerk, intentional, for example, and that Rolf Meyer, Ramaphosa's mate. Now, there's some very interesting information in that email, and it's a reason I'm putting it on the record, because, yeah, there were some huge flaws and there were some terrible things associated with apartheid. No one is disputing that, but it was a system that cared for all races. If you look at what's happening in South Africa today, if you are white, you are ostracized, you are facing extreme persecution, and it's actually been put on top of you by the government, the ANC government, through things like BEE, which basically means if you're white, you cannot get a job, and other race-based policies that they're bringing in. And it is completely collapsing what used to be a country that actually was able to work together. And it is just so tragic. All right, I've said my 5 cents worth, but thank you so much for that input, Janine. That's fantastic. All right, guys, please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. Ring the bell for the updates, and have a great day. Bye for now.